Mrs. Heather Blankenship,
Yeah.
welcome back to the Action Academy Round 2. How are you?
Good to see you in person.
Good to see you in person. Yeah, we've known each other for like 2 years, and we just finally met in person for the first time.
We just send random Instagram messages back and forth.
Dude, that's how you know it's real. That's how you know it's real. But awesome to finally have you here in person, and we're going Round 2 on the Action Academy podcast on the YouTube channel for people watching. So for somebody that's brand new that hasn't perhaps listened to your previous episode with us, who are you? Kind of what's your claim to fame in the real estate investing world?
Sure. So for those of you I haven't met before, my name's Heather Blankenship, and I've been investing in real estate for over a decade. Next week will actually be 14 years, which is totally crazy to think of. I bought my first RV park when I was 26 years old, and I just kept building a portfolio from there. RV parks, mobile home parks, Section 8 multifamily, and that's how it got started.
So tell people like kind of the scale of what you've got right now. So I think last we spoke, you had over like $30 million assets under management. Is that still around the same or has it grown?
It's the same. I sold a few things. I went through the process of selling some of my smaller stuff because when I bought that first RV parks are a really active asset class. Mm-hmm. They have freaking amazing cash flow and really great appreciation, but they're really active. And I was running that first property myself without a property manager. And I'm like, dang, this is nice, but I don't want to do this forever. So the first thing I thought, I'm like, oh, I'll buy a duplex, right? So that I start building this, what I thought would be my retirement. I decided I was going to try and build something that gave me $100,000 a month of passive, what I thought of as passive income. So I started buying some duplexes and triplexes, some mobile home parks. And now, 7 or 8 years later, I don't really want a lot of that small stuff anymore. As we know, we're getting $200-$300 a door on those, and they've actually gained a ton of equity. So I spent the last 2 years selling off some of those duplexes and triplexes and some of those smaller things in my portfolio and buying some glamping resorts and RV parks with that cash.
Can you go into your thought process when it comes to like pruning the portfolio? Because I think right now we're in a season where a lot of people do have some portfolios, and now it's time for them to make an educated decision about what parts they do want to cut off, because I think up to this point, the last decade's advice has been you buy until you die.
Yeah.
And you don't cut your real estate.
And now any different. So you just keep doing that, right?
Yeah.
And so I've never raised money. I've never taken like outside capital. I've built the whole portfolio with literally just working my butt off, refinancing and putting cash in, which is what they teach us, right? The BRRRR method. Yeah. But this is like a total people will hate me for this, but the BRRRR method is something you have to eventually stop doing or you will never have any cash flow. Yep. You're literally pulling all of your cash out to buy that next deal. And sure, you own a bunch of stuff, but you never have any cash, right? So you have to eventually stop doing that. And buying all this stuff with my own money meant I didn't have a bunch of money, y'all, right? I didn't start out with any money. So that first triplex that I bought, which was 8 years ago, was $90,000 when I bought it.
Oof.
Which is totally crazy, right? And it was almost 100 years old. So it was this old old duplex, and it cash flowed really great, but it's in the ghetto. It's on Section 8, and I started so that was worth $380,000 when I sold it about a year ago. And when you start looking at what your cash flow is, how much money in cash you would have to reinvest into something else when you sell it. It's all math, right? Mm-hmm. We know math is math. So when you do the math on if I sold this, what can I do with that cash and how much cash can it make me? And did it make sense for me to go in and remodel these properties again? Because they're 100 years old. I turned 41 day before yesterday.
Dude, happy late birthday. Hi. What the hell? Wait, so was that your birthday that I saw you?
The day before. Yeah.
Okay, so now I don't feel as bad, but happy late birthday.
Thanks. In your 30s, you think you're going to think you're older, but you just turned 30. You don't think you're older, right? You're like, I'm 30, right? At 40, you're kind of like, I think I'm a little bit older now. And you start thinking about, okay, someday is retirement. Mm-hmm. And I don't want these properties in 20 years for my retirement that are 100 years old. You want something that can last through you're 80, 90 years old and can still be passed down to your kids. Well, when it's already 100 years old at this point, it's time to sell it because everything needs to be redone at this point. I am not a flipper. I'm not a contractor. So doing the math, I could take the cash out or sell it, use the cash to put as a down payment to something else that's going to last longer, going to cash flow better, and function more like that business. I know you like buying businesses. RV parks and glamping resorts are a perfect mix between business and real estate. So you get the cash flow, you still get the tax advantages of the real estate, and makes sense to sell it.
Yeah, I think that you are a good example of, like, now you've tried so many different things.
Dude, you like stumble through it.
Yeah. And that's the only way that you figure out what clarity is. Everybody's waiting for the confidence to take action, but it's to take into the action that builds the confidence. And so now you have this very clear path where you're like, I know what my brand is, I know what my aesthetic is, and then you reach a certain financial point where it's not just the ROE, like return on equity. I call it ROE, return on energy and effort. So like that's what made me sell my single family is I just looked at it because I was struggling with it. I was struggling with the decision. And I was like, I really don't want these because I evicted a tenant when I moved. She realized that I wasn't there, that she could just stop paying. And I had another tenant that was the property manager, and then they kind of were in on it with them because that's what you do in a co-living property. You kind of have one person that's elevated as the PM. And because no traditional property manager wants to take a co-living property, really. So I just realized, I was like, dude, like, what am I doing here? This isn't going to be my wealth. This isn't going to be what gets me like where I want to go.
Okay, we should stop and point out that there's nothing wrong that that's where you start, right?
Yeah.
Because you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And the things that you learn along the way and the decisions that you make doing that are what elevate you to the next spot.
Yeah, but what got you here won't take you there.
100% agree.
And I think that people kind of dig their heels in, and I think this applies to a lot of areas in life, where it's almost, what's it called? It's sunk cost fallacy, where it's like you're climbing up this mountain and then 80% of the way up, you realize that the only way to get to the top is to go all the way back to the bottom and start all over
I love that example.
It sucks, but I was just like, dude, I could sell these and pocket so much cash from the appreciation and move. I think that was a really good idea that you had. And also just like the energy and effort. Like somebody's listening to this right now and they've got those properties that are just dogs and it's taking up 80% of their effort, and so we give them 20% of the cash flow, just cut them. Is there any other like rules of thumb that you can give?
Yeah, well, my question though is always, what can you do? Unless it's like draining money, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about something that's draining money. We're talking about something that's maybe not cash flowing as well as you want it to.
Or neutral. Or
neutral, whatever. So look at the money that you can, if you sell, what do you have left over and what can you do with that is always my question. If you sell it, what are you going to do with the money? Mm-hmm. And that's usually how we make our decisions. It's a different time because starting 14 years ago, there weren't a million gurus on the internet. And I don't use gurus as like a bad word. A lot of the people legitimately have really great education. And if you go through X weeks of training to learn to do X, Y, Z, you're so much further than you would have been if you'd have done trial and error and like stumbled through everything, which is what I had to do. And so I think we're on information overload. I don't disagree with that. Mm-hmm. But if people would choose something and then learn about only that to then execute on that, they would be so much further than just like foiling around trying to figure it out.
It's more important that you pick than what you pick.
Yes, so important.
Yeah. So what's some advice you can give to somebody that's maybe getting started or maybe they have a few properties and they're looking for the next thing? How can you kind of guide them in the direction of where you think that they should possibly go?
Really think it depends, right? We all have different goals. And sometimes I think people want the next thing just because they see everybody on the internet getting the next thing.
Yeah.
When we did our introduction, we didn't talk about that I have 5 kids and my oldest is 13 and my youngest is 10 months. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's okay to not be buying a next thing right now and to be focusing on other areas of your life because, right?
Wait, hold on a second, Heather. Let's pause there really quickly. So you're telling me that other areas of your life outside of just cap rate and cash on cash influence your investing decision?
100%.
Oh my God. I forgot about that.
Right?
Nobody talks about that anymore.
So I heard this quote one time and it said that no success will make up for failure in the household. Man, when you start thinking about that, you make your decisions a little bit different. I'm not talking about somebody who's a total newbie and hasn't done anything yet because you have those years. And I do believe in those early years, you have to hustle a little bit and you've got to give some things up. But you get to a point to where it does not have to be full speed ahead, 100% on. I don't actually believe in like true balance, but you have to have your version of balance. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that means that I don't work on Fridays. And that's kind of my standard. There is always a podcast. There's always something that sounds really freaking amazing, but I don't do work on Fridays. My kids are homeschooled. We do fun Fridays, and that is my boundary. I also don't, a lot of people who ask you to come on a podcast or be on their whatever, like, can you do 7 p.m.? I'm like, I can't do 7 p.m. I stop working at 4, and that is a hard boundary because I want that time with my family at night, because your kids, they're only going to be little for so long. And if you don't set some of those hard boundaries, you look up and they're 3 or 4 years older and you're still doing that. My point in going down that rabbit hole is there's a lot of other areas in your life. Are you healthy? Are you physically, mentally? Do you have a good relationship with a significant other? Mm-hmm. What's your relationship with your family like? How's your spiritual life? Like, finance is only like a piece of that pie. And so when somebody's trying to make a decision, I always want to know, what are you going to have to give up to get there? And is it something you're willing to give up? Because in this phase of life, I don't want $1 billion portfolio because I am not willing to give up right now what it takes to get there.
That is really, really well put. Instead of talking about all the things that we have to do to get a goal, instead ask what must be given up
to get there. Because everyone's like, work more hours, work harder. Okay, well, we're still humans. Mm-hmm. There are still only 24 hours in the day. We still only have a certain capacity. And let's get real. There are a lot of people who are lazy as fuck, and we are not talking about that, right? So if you are that high achiever who's really working your butt off, what are you going to give up to get to that next level?
I've got a question for you. You're rich.
No, I'm not. Well, comparatively, right?
We're both comparatively rich.
Right.
So, like, objectively speaking, so there's a point to this. I promise. There's a punchline to this. My issue with real estate investing and the financial freedom community at large is there's such a culture of delayed gratification.
Yes.
And it's almost like you get whipped and stoned for going and spending any money on anything.
Yep.
And they're like, no, you need to 1031 that. Put that money into the next property. Put that cash flow into the next property. At what point are people allowed to freaking enjoy themselves?
I'm not. That's the whole point of what I just talked about.
Yeah.
Right? Because we were talking about somebody earlier before we started the recording, and we won't bring up their names. But I was in business with them a while ago, and it never failed. They wanted that phone call with me on Sundays. My family and I go to church every Sunday. I am not taking a business phone call on Sunday. We have Monday through Thursday. I have worked my butt off for enough years to say, I can talk to you Monday through Thursday. I'm so willing to talk to you anytime on Monday through Thursday, but it's not going to be. And they had such a problem with that.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy. Because they're like, no, we want to talk on Sundays. Like, it's not going to happen. And
good indicator of a misaligned partnership.
Right? I think only you can decide like when you're willing to spend the money, because it goes both ways, right? It's this balance. And if you spend too much money, then you're stuck and you got to go back to work and you have no freedom. Mm-hmm. But if you don't spend any of the money, you're freaking miserable. And what are you doing it for anyway?
And all you're worried about is adding another 100 units and another 100 units and another 100 units.
And I think it's social media, because you watch, and it took me a minute to figure this out, because I don't have a closing every week. Mm-hmm. I do not have 30 closings a month. I don't flip. I don't wholesale. So there's no reason for me to be doing that. I buy larger deals and I'm buying commercial properties. So if I buy 4 new properties a year, that is a huge win for me. It's not other people's money. It's 100% mine. That's a huge win for me. But you could easily watch some of the different people on Instagram that you're legitimately friends with who flip and wholesale that need to do that many deals to have enough cash to survive or to invest or to meet their lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And so you're not comparing apples to apples. And I want to tell you a quick story. So I had only owned my first RV park, and I became a broker for RV parks, which I learned so much from. And I'm so grateful for that experience, because I got to see so many different people's profit and loss statements. Mm-hmm. And I learned so much about my industry doing that. But one of the first deals that I was on a team for was, we're going to call him Bob, because I always use his name and that's not fair. So we're going to call him Bob.
Okay, Bob.
Bob is getting ready to sell his huge portfolio. It's worth $200 million. Mm. And I'm like, Bob is the man. And I am like this small fish. And like, Bob is so cool. And we go through this process of selling Bob's portfolio. And on the day of closing, at the time I owned one RV park that was worth $5 million. And I had a little less than $2 million in debt. And we go to the closing table. Bob pays off all of his investors, and Bob has $1 million left on his $200 million portfolio. And we had just left one of the biggest conferences for the industry. There were thousands of people there, and Bob was the man at this conference, right? But Bob only had $1 million when he went and he sold the whole portfolio. If I had sold that day, I would have had $3 million. So in the grand scheme of life, my one property that caused so much less stress than all the investors he had to pay off, all the responsibilities he had for operating that. Dude, we're not comparing apples to apples when we're talking about these conversations of like,
Insane.
I've got 30 closings this month. Yeah, but you're going to make like 10 grand a pop, which is great. But then you got to pay taxes on that because you're a wholesaler or whatever, right? It's not the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's really big. And then also what I run into a lot in my DMs is people that are single family investors, and they're trying to compare apples to people like me that are buying small businesses or people like you that are buying commercial, and it takes a team. Like there's a whole team that's involved with this process, like everything from lenders to a lot of the times capital partners. I want to get on that here with you in a second. Operating partners, like property managers, all these different people. So I'm like, dude, right now you're buying single family and you're comparing this, and it's like you're standing on a football field and you're holding the football by yourself with no helmet, no pads, and you're going up against an entire other team. And you're like, why are you guys scoring points and I'm not? Like, dude, you're doing it by yourself, my brother in Christ. Like, partner up with people. So question for you. So people may be listening to this, especially people with like families, and they're like, wait, so how the hell did Heather do this without outside capital? Because I think it's the most impressive thing. Like, you may be one of the only ones that I know that hasn't done OPM.
Dude, I'm totally not the only one. But
the ones that I've interviewed.
So I was so blessed with the first property I bought. I was 26. I was driving across the country in a camper, and I kept seeing all of these parking spots, or all of these RV sites that people were parking in. They were all full. They're paying to stay there. And in my mind, I kept thinking, oh my God, these people are making so much money, and they're just renting parking spots. It's not parking spots. That would be buying parking garages. I know that now. Totally different business and a whole lot more needed to operations-wise to run that. But it was back in 2011, after the market had collapsed from 2008, and a bank still had this property on their books. And so they were willing to give me a loan with no money down. And I had 6 months of interest only to figure out how the heck do I run an RV park, which I knew nothing about. And that first payment was $18,500. So I had to very quickly figure out how the heck do I run an RV park. So that's how it started. But as you fast forward, I figure out how to run the RV park. It starts cash flowing. I start building up the equity. That park is worth about $13 million now. So I had the equity in that property because I worked so hard, trial and error, figuring out how do I make this profitable. You roll it into the next. You make another good buying decision, and you force the appreciation with better cash flow, better operations. The operations part is I'm truly naturally gifted, but then I've also learned some skills, right? At running operations on that stuff. Push that cash flow higher, which is the advantage of commercial real estate, right? And then you've got that higher equity to then go buy the next deal. And so that's how I did it without anyone else's money.
Honestly, yeah, just the equity symbol.
Yeah. And you can't, when we were talking about when are you going to enjoy the money, you can't go blow a bunch of money and keep doing that, right? You can live really nicely, but you can't, you're not buying private jets and you're not buying Ferraris, right? You do still have nice stuff. You go on vacation with your family, but it's not crazy, right? You got to find a balance for you there.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is actually an interesting conversation to have because, like, right now I'm cash flow heavy. That's what I've been focused on.
We were talking about that.
We were talking about that. Now with taxes, I'm 37%. And so now I have to make a decision, informed decision about if I want to continue like what I'm doing versus going back into real estate and then building up equity because my balance sheet, like, I don't have as much equity because you're not forcing that appreciation, right? Like, even when I was having my real estate, I had that. Business valuation is a little bit different. Like, it will come in like a giant ball later down the road. But in the meantime, it's just like trying to figure out, my CPA literally said, like, hey, you don't need more cash flow. Stop doing this. Like invest in equity. So can you maybe walk us through a little bit for somebody that's listening that's beginning or intermediate about making the distinction and figuring out should they invest for cash flow or should they invest for equity?
I think our industry gets this wrong too, right? Because we talk about how everybody has to leave their W-2 job, right?
Who says that, Heather? Yeah, exactly.
Right. There are legitimately people who love their job.
Yeah.
There's some people who love being doctors. Not everybody, right? I'm sure we could find 100 of them that hate it, but there's some people who love it. There's some people who, I don't know, we could come up with a bunch of stuff. I met a veterinarian at a meetup last night, and she loves her business, right? She does not want to leave that job. Those people are not looking to leave their W-2 job. So they need to invest for tax purposes and for their future, right? When they're not going to be working anymore. So they are making they're more of like an appreciation buy as opposed to a cash flow buy. But then there's people like you and I, when you start out and you're like, well, I don't want to go to a W-2 job. That's not for me. We need cash flow in the short term. So you're constantly balancing this cash flow and appreciation. But when you asked me a few minutes ago, well, what would you tell to this person who's trying to make this decision or that decision? Can't really answer that without knowing a little more. It's kind of like you right now, you have enough cash flow. So the way you buy is going to be solely on what gives you the best tax benefits.
Well, let's talk about it. Because for me, I'll be honest with you, like hand on the Bible on the podcast right now, my issue is I know business so much now, and the business deals that I do are such high cash flow.
You'd rather pay the taxes?
I just can't get around an 8% pref. That doesn't wet my whistle. I feel like I'd rather just buy an index fund than doing an 8% pref.
You mean buying into somebody else's deal?
That sounds awful. And then also, I don't really want to be a GP. To be honest, I've gotten offered. I've been offered to be a co-GP like once a week. I don't want to do it either.
Why don't you just buy? Okay. So again, our industry tries to make it sound like you have to buy these like amazing million-unit apartment complexes for it to be an option. You could go pay cash for a, I don't know, normal person size apartment complex and then do your cost segregation on that, and you've done great for your taxes. And you don't have to have this like glamorous, I own a 500 unit blah 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 in Austin, Texas.
I know, but then I'm like, but that $500,000 in a business give me so much more cash flow.
Okay, so back to math is math, right?
Please de-influence me.
Okay, we're back to math is math. So if you do the math,
I know. If
you pay the taxes, you have whatever left over.
Yeah.
If you buy the property and you don't have to pay as many taxes and you do your cost segregation, how does it end up at the bottom? Have you done that?
Yeah.
And do you just pay the taxes or do you buy something?
Right now, I'm just paying the taxes. But that was from an effort perspective. Like what we made a decision on this last time, and we'll make a pivot here right now because my personal tax thing, I don't think serves the audience. I don't know. And maybe I just don't want to talk about it either. It's probably a coping mechanism. No, it's just I've got nothing to write off on my taxes this year, and it sucks.
You could have a couple kids.
It sucks. Well, there we go. So we're working on that to have a diversified portfolio. We're working on it, so we'll get into it. Let's actually go to the kids really quickly, because right now there's everybody that's listening to this or watching these videos right now, and they're like, I have a family, I have a job, I'm too busy to invest. To which you say,
I see you could go both ways. You're either too busy to invest or you're too busy to have kids. Everyone, because I have the people who are killing it in investing, whatever avenue it may be, and they're like, I'm too busy to have kids. Right? And so then you've got the people who are working and have the kids, and they're like, I'm too busy to invest. And so it's constantly one struggle or the other. And there is no perfect combination that I can give somebody. It's only what works best for you. But I can promise you that I run a women's mastermind with hundreds of women, and we don't really specialize in beginners. So our women are 70% people who have 4 or more deals. Lots of them are making over $1 million a year. And the reason I bring that up is because the women who have said, I'm going to wait to have kids and I'm going to build my business, I can't even count how many of them right now are on fertility treatments trying to get pregnant because they're like 38, 39, 40, and they're going, holy crap, it's dang near too late. And I didn't focus on having a relationship and building a family. And now it's no longer an option. Because a lot of the women who, and I'm going to get so much hate for this, a lot of the women who are in their late 20s or early 30s, they're like, I got so much time. But then you're on the flip side of it and you've got the kids and you're like, holy crap, I have no extra time to start investing. Those are those years we were talking about earlier where you're going to have to buckle down and you are in that hustle culture and you have to make it happen. My 13-year-old daughter's in the room with us right now, and she has been to more closings, attorneys' offices, board meetings, conferences.
She just made a face, too. She hates every second of it.
Quarter of podcast recording than any other child on the planet. We were actually at a meetup in Phoenix last week, and she was so mad at me because there were probably 30 different people who asked her if she'd started buying real estate yet. She's like, why do they keep asking me that? And so my point in saying that is when I told y'all I bought that park 14 years ago next week, I got pregnant with her the same week I bought that property.
Congratulations on the celebration.
Right? And so I've had kids the whole time. You just make it happen. I can remember shoveling mulch with a baby strapped to me because that's what you have to do. And when you're in those building phases, remember we talked about what are you going to give up to get there? Mm-hmm. You're going to have to give up something.
Yeah.
So how bad do you want it? Because when I promise you that those women, they're going to get to 40 and think, holy crap, now I'm on fertility treatments and I'm trying to figure this out. The same thing happens with investing. You're going to look at yourself and you're going to be 50 years old, 55 years old, and you didn't make those investment decisions. Now you can't take as much risk. You have to make a lot better decisions because you're 55. Starting over at 55 is so different than if you fail at 27. Right? So every question comes back to how does the math work and what are you willing to give up to get there?
The saddest conversation that I have today is with a person that's in their 20s and is afraid of risk.
Right? You have nothing to lose.
That is the saddest conversation because if you are in your 20s, risk should be in every sentence that you're talking.
Yes.
Every single sentence. The only risk in your 20s is not having any risk. I would say instead, let's focus on the question of what work would I do if I knew that I was going to work for the rest of my life?
Okay, I love that. Let's talk about it. So when I got married for the first time, I was 24 years old and I met someone on the internet and I went to Vegas and got married. We were married for like 10 years. So,
oh my God, Mississippi.
We were married for like 10 years and had 3 kids. So we could talk about how terribly it ended, but for the way it happened, 10 years pretty successful, right? What I didn't know is I married somebody whose father had hundreds of millions of dollars. I had no idea because I didn't know him long enough to know, right? And
what?
I'm a crazy idiot. I likely left out a few details of it. Even if you Googled my last name, you'd figure it out. Okay. So I was working. I was a finance manager for Enterprise. And I really liked doing it, actually. Okay. I thought it was fun. I learned so much about sales, and it was like a fun game to me, right?
Okay.
But I realized my husband then, he was a race car driver. So he traveled like 200 days a year. This is like a totally different life, Brian.
Okay.
Traveled like 200 days a year. So either I was going to never see him, and I was going to go to work, or I was going to quit working. But I'm 24 years old. So I quit working because we didn't need the money, obviously. Sure. And I tried sewing. I tried knitting. I ran marathons. I was fucking bored. I was so bored. I became Blankenship's wife. I had no identity and I was bored as heck. Mm-hmm. I don't think most people get the opportunity when they're young to truly like kind of retire. Mm-hmm. You can go see some countries. You can hang out on a beach for a little bit. But you eventually, with the type of personality that we have, you want something else. If you leave me by myself too long, I have built another business. Mm-hmm. So I had this unique situation where pretty young, I realized I didn't want to not work. However, there are legitimately things I hate doing. I do not want certain responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So my take is you figure out something that you can get excited about and you hire somebody for the other parts. So I have an amazing team. I have like 30 people on my team. And I only do the parts that genuinely make me excited. And I don't think about it's Monday. I still work Monday through Thursday.
Do you even remember weekends? Well, I mean, I guess you do.
I don't.
Well, technically, I guess you do because you have like the 3 days.
I have the structure of, right? We do fun Fridays and things like that. But I'm not thinking about it's Monday morning. I got to get up. I am so excited. My husband has to be like, Heather, stop talking about it. Like, because I don't turn it off. It's fun to me. It's legitimately my hobby because the parts that for RV parks, never did I be like, oh my God, I'm going to own an RV park. This is like my life dream. Mm-hmm. But figuring out how to push the most cash flow out of those properties is like a fun game to me.
It's a really meaty problem to solve.
It is.
And we love solving problems.
Right. Like, what can I turn this into?
It's a game.
It's a game. And it's so much fun to me. So I don't want the passive income because this is so much fun to me. Mm-hmm. So I think people need to be figuring out what part of it can they get really excited about, and then hiring somebody who can get really excited about those other parts on your team so that you can truly build something that you don't need to retire from.
It's now to a point where you have to remind yourself, what parts do I really enjoy? Mm-hmm. It's not that business is easy or that business is always going to be sunshine and rainbows. But the point of business, and that what you just said reminded me of this journey that I'm going through right now, is you need to really have that clarity about what parts you do enjoy, document that, and then also document the parts that you hate and hire for that. So it's like document and delegate. So now it's like the one-on-ones and all these team meetings and all these management sessions and all of these.
How do you get yourself out of that, right?
Well, now I hired an operations director.
There you go, yeah.
And it's just such a stupid, simple fix that somebody that's listening to this, I bet you that one thing will change their entire life, where they're just like, oh, I don't have to underwrite these deals?
Well, it's the same thing with
or I don't have to talk to capital partners?
Or, right, I don't have to cold call to find a deal, right? Yeah. It's the same thing when people are thinking about buying that first single-family home or that first duplex. They're like, I don't want to deal with tenants. You're like, you don't have to. Like, that's not a part that you're required to do. Mm-hmm. And so that's always an option in all of these situations that we're talking about. But the most important part, though, is you do have to figure out which part you like. And sometimes that requires doing all of the parts because you usually haven't done something like this before to know which parts you're going to like. Also, you could have been in a job like you were in and you didn't realize that you would actually love that marketing and sales in your own business because you were so burnt out on it doing it for somebody else. Sometimes that looks different doing it for yourself.
Well, the best piece of advice that I give to people that are on the fence about leaving their job is literally like just zoom out, and at 80 years old, like, would you be proud of doing what you did for 80 years? And sometimes the answer is yes. You're like, I was a teacher for 80 years. Or I was a teacher for 40 years. Or I was a ER doctor for 40 years. But for me, I was selling uniforms. I think most people are in positions like that where they're like, dude, I'm worth so much more than this, and I can impact so many more people and do so many more things than what I'm doing here in this job.
Okay, well, let's talk about that from a different perspective. There is so much more to you than what your job is.
True. And what work you do.
Yeah, your identity doesn't have to all be in that role. And you haven't gotten to the place of being like a husband and a father and some of those other really gratifying parts of life. So you haven't gotten to experience that yet. And I'm so excited to have the same conversation with you a few years into that because you look at it a little bit differently.
What I'm most excited for in my life is to seriously have so much documentation of before and after, because most of Action Academy, you've seen them, you've spoken to our group, like they all have kids. Yeah. I'm actually the minority in the group of where we're just like jet setting out traveling. Most of them are, late 20s, 30s, 40s with 2 kids, and they just want financial freedom to hang out with their kids. They enjoy traveling sometimes. They want to go take their family and go do stuff and do fun things. But for the most part, they just want to like hang out with their family. And so for me, I'm excited for the day where like every single person since the inception of Action Academy has seen me single and like, this is my baby, this Action Academy.
Yeah.
And then so one day, they're going to be able to see me for like get married and like have kids. And then they get to be like, all right, take a seat.
We're going to put the wedding on YouTube live.
We're
going to put the wedding on YouTube live.
I'm not. I want a big ass wedding though. I don't know. I don't understand dudes that don't care about their wedding. I care about my wedding.
My husband cared more than I.
I literally have like I want to get married at Lake Como.
Okay.
So I've got this vision, which of course could completely change depending on who I marry. Of course, I'm not insane. I'm like, whatever you want, babe. But I got this vision for Lake Como, and then I want to rent out the entire hotel because it sucks whenever you invite people for a destination wedding and then everyone's got to like pay thousands of dollars. And so I just want to like have enough money to where all of it's covered. And I'm like, show up.
My husband is from Singapore, and in Singapore, they have to go to the military first.
Mm-hmm.
Their parents are really strict, typical.
So they grow up fast.
They grow up fast,
Mm-hmm.
and they're significantly more responsible, and they have significantly more life experience by the time they finish college.
Mm-hmm.
So when I met him, even though he was only a couple years out of college, it was because he was a physical therapist, so he got a doctorate, and he'd already been in the military first.
Mm-hmm.
So if he had been a normal American guy at that age, we may not have had the same type of connection, right?
Highly doubt it, yeah.
Nor would he have been capable of stepping into the crazy life that I live, not just the kids, but the business decisions and the stress that goes along with that and all of that. So I'm saying that to you to encourage you to not get so specific.
I'm not. I'm open. I'm open.
That you miss out on somebody who could have been amazing just because they aren't exactly what you think you want them to be.
Like every single thing that I've heard about having a family with investing, people use it as an excuse. And I think that it is if you have a family, it is your number one priority and obligation to do what's required to make sure that they're taken care of. And so through all this, I think just the excuse of I'm too busy, just it grinds my gears because you were the ultimate example of I've got a lot of stuff going on. And you made it happen. And every single person that I know that's successful, like Caitlin's my community director, she's pregnant with her fifth. Like she made it happen and she makes it happen. And every single Zoom call she's on, she's got kids running around. And that's okay. At the end of the day, I enjoy interviewing people like you. And because, people listen to me and they think must be nice, because it's like single, no kids. But then I'm like, no, like.
You can do it.
You can do it. Yeah. So if you had any closing advice for anybody that's, maybe getting started or they're looking to do this and now they're like, okay, I got a little bit more experience. I got a little bit more confidence after listening to Heather's story and like kind of what she's accomplished. What's some advice you can give them moving forward?
I would say that accepting that nothing's going to be perfect. In order to do what I do, my house is not clean. I live in a very nice house and it is a mother freaking disaster. The goal at the end of the night is that at least the dishes are washed.
You got someone that does it?
No, we don't have a housekeeper. We don't have a nanny.
You don't want to?
I don't. I've had a nanny at one point, and it's pretty invasive, especially where my kids are homeschooled and somebody's there with you all the time. I really like the bond and relationship we build with it being just us. But it's not going to be pretty. It's a mess. I can remember, do you know Jerry Norton? Mm-hmm. For those of you who don't, him and his wife, Anne Marie, have 10 kids. Oof. And they do way more than you or I do with 10 kids. And we have the same 12-passenger van. And his wife is this like organization expert. And our vans were parked next to each other at an event. And you open up hers and it's like perfectly organized with labels and all of these like, again, it's perfect. You open up mine and everything falls out and back onto the ground and
like rolling, a hoarder house.
Rolling down the parking lot. And the difference is that Jerry is the one who focuses on their business. Mm-hmm. And Anne Marie is an amazing woman at running their household. But a lot of times as women who are the ones who are investors, we're running a little bit of both. And so we are not going to, our house isn't going to be perfect. And you got to accept that that's not okay. And you're not always going to look like this. I got ready for Brian this morning to look this way for the podcast.
That's why we do video podcasts. Everyone gets ready, baby. I put on my makeup too.
And like learning to just let some stuff go. Everything's not going to be perfect. Otherwise, you'll never get started, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. You got to let some of it go.
And if my future wife is listening to this, it's okay, babe. We can hire a houseman. It's fine. Thank you so much for coming on. I like this conversation because, we've talked RV parks before, but it's cool to get like the full, story. And I like sharing some of my stuff too. So thanks so much for coming on for round 2 of Action Academy. And I'll let y'all get back to it as we talk with a kid in the room, of course, on brand.
Exactly.
See y'all.